Formula One continued with its 2022 launch season on Tuesday as Williams became the sixth team to unveil its new car ahead of the new campaign. The Williams FW44 was released via renders ahead of its on-track debut later on Tuesday at Silverstone, and it gives us yet another glimpse of what the grid for this year is going to look like. It's the first car that's been produced fully under Doralton's ownership and comes with a revised livery as well as a revised driver lineup as well, with Alexander Albon coming in as George Russell's replacement. Joining me to discuss all things Williams following the launch of the car is Autosport's technical editor Jake Boxall-Legge. Now Jake, first of all, when we looked at the renders, obviously I know you can't get much from the technical side of it, and even with the renders it was a show car, again I think Williams style, but the livery, I mean that's what tech guys are really into, I know. What did you make of it?
I'll be honest with you, when I first saw the livery, given I've been away for the past week in Mexico covering Formula E, it looked very similar to the Neo, which surprised me, but I like it. It also looks a little bit like the 2019, I think it was, Genza Formula 3 car. It's the same colour scheme. It's a bit sort of niche, I know, but I do like it. Over the last couple of years, Williams has sort of been rebuilding this identity, and this is sort of what Doralton now wants, this team to move towards. It's classically gone for that dark blue colour, but it's got a little bit of a twist to it, which I do kind of like from an aesthetic standpoint for sure.
Neo and Genza, that's very, very niche indeed, but I like it. Yeah, it is definitely a diversion from what they've done in recent years. The team also announced it's removed the Senna S from the car. It said it wants to do more work sort of with the Senna Foundation and things like that. It had carried it obviously since his death in 1994. But then later in the day, the car did finally hit the track at Silverstone. It was halted by a slight electrical issue to begin with, but then it finally got out there. And I mean, for you, Jake, that's where you can really get stuck into it, I guess, sort of technically, finally looking at the nitty details of it. What could you glean from it technically? I mean, what stands out from the new Williams?
Well, first of all, can I go on record and say I don't mind if a team uses the Formula One show car, as long as it, then goes, here's the actual one moments later. Red Bull, but it was really interesting to see that Williams out on the track, because it looked, again, we're seeing a lot of variation. I don't think this is something that a lot of people expected when it came to these new rules. Everyone was like, oh, they're all going to look the same, they're all going to look like that show car, and it's like, yeah, it is if they do only livery launches, but actually it proves that there is room for maneuver, if you like. So I guess let's start at the front a little bit with the Williams FW44. That nose looks very, very 1990s, I think. If you look at the Williams FW13, it looks a little bit like that, with the way that you've got that rounded nose that sort of transitions into the sort of the chassis bulkhead, if you like, and how they've raised the bodywork slightly to accommodate the rockers for the push rods. So it looks a little bit like that. It does look like a little bit of a throwback. I've seen a picture of an Onyx on social media as well. Lots of different comparisons there. I think a lot of teams are working out what the best way to go with on the new noses is. We've seen Aston Martin with a sort of very flat, very square kind of nose geometry. Williams has gone for something very, very rounded. So I think they're just looking at it, it's trying to work out the best way of getting that airflow underneath the now lower nose, which you didn't have before. You didn't have that problem so much because you had the mounting pylons between the nose and the front wing. You no longer have that now. It's attached directly, and because the floor is so important with this new formula, it's just working out the best way to create a clean supply of airflow going underneath without too much drag or anything like that. So I think that's part of the rationale behind it. You've seen from another shot as well the very shrunken side pods. Again, this is another area for lots of variation. We've seen the Aston Martin with very, very big side pods, but with a very big undercut as well to really try and maximise what they're getting out of the floor, for example. You're seeing that with Williams. It's tried to maximise the space on top of the back of the floor, maybe at the cost of the front of the floor a little bit, but again, it's interesting to see this variation, see how all of these teams are tackling this unique design problem, if you like. These new floors are really, really changing the way that the teams are looking at the cars. You've got that really inboard loaded front wing as well, which again is interesting to see. You kind of could glean that from the launch, from the show car a little bit. But Williams has sort of taken it to a little bit of an extreme, and you've got the flap adjuster right next to the nose, so they're trying to recover from what we knew as the Y250 vortex beforehand. So that's just sort of trying to get that effect back a tiny little bit. And of course, you'll have seen the big central Alpine style teapot air intake at the middle of the car. So that's a direction that Williams decided to go down as well, to try and minimise the side pod size. So it's all a lot of compromise, and I appreciate that I have just waffled on about a car for far too long, but there's lots of interesting things about this Williams. A lot to dissect, a lot to see, and we'll see how it actually turns out in testing next week.
Indeed, and it's not waffling, because it's this time of year. Like, we see the launches, we get the chance to have a first look at the cars, and particularly at the start of a new technical era for Formula One, and one that is so important. I mean, yeah, you can't I think put a price on that, really. So it's it's really exciting. I mean, particularly for people technically inclined such as yourself, and obviously all the fans out there as well. And we had a call yesterday with Ross Brawn and Nicholas Tambassis, who obviously have been so central to creating these new regulations, and that's going to come out on Autosport and motorsport.com in the coming days. But we did talk about the floor and how obviously it's so important now because of the return of ground effects and everything. Do you think that's going to be one of the main battlegrounds this year between the teams, how they use the floor to try and recover the downforce loss and really make the most of that ground effect?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's going to come down to a case of again, and it was kind of like that with diffusers back in the day. Obviously, the more work you're getting the floor to do, the less you have to rely on your upper body downforce, and that's such a reduced consideration this year because the floor is expected to do so much more. So it's all about maximizing how much downforce you get out of it, how much you seal that floor to ensure that the downforce you get is consistent as well, so that when you get into all kinds of corners, you can rely on having that downforce. I think one of the biggest things this year as well, and we've seen that from a couple of the launch cars, is how flat everything is running, how close to the ground everything is running. There's zero rake on these cars. There's no inclination whatsoever. They need this floor to be as flat as possible to ensure that the ground effect they're getting is consistent. And it's going to be interesting to see how teams deal with things like bumps in the road, how they deal with curbs and sausage curbs and God knows what. Especially when it sort of links into the revised suspension for this year as well, and everything seems a lot stiffer with the different tyres and with the wider wheel rims as well. So there's a big trade-off here, and it's really, really interesting to see how all of these teams are able to sort of put all of the pieces in place and make sure that their car is stable, is rideable on curbs and things like that, is compliant, and yet is able to sustain that level of downforce. It's going to be really, really interesting to see. And the team that gets all of those elements right will be the team that is the best.
Absolutely, and of course the drivers hoping that Williams is the team that gets that right is Nicholas Latifi and Alexander Albon. Dam's teammates in Formula 2 reunited for this season. Got quite Dam style race suits as well, someone pointed out on social media. For Nicholas Latifi, he's coming into quite an important season. It's his third season in F1. Obviously he was subject to unacceptable and abhorrent abuse in the wake of his crash in Abu Dhabi. Revealed yesterday he had to even hire security for a trip to Winter Wonderland in London over the winter because of how much things have ramped up, how dire the situation had got in terms of that abuse. So it's good to see him sort of back on form, though he's ready for a new season. I mean, JBL, what can we expect from Nicky this season? I mean, I know you know him quite well from your days working in F2 as well. Is this a year for him to really take a step forward and build on the experience he's made with Williams, given he's the established driver at the team?
Well, if you look at his junior career, for example, in Formula 2 particularly, it took him a few seasons to kind of get up and running. And whether that's because of machinery or whether that's because of the team or whether it's just because of the way he is as a driver, he spent most of those years with Dams and, he got better and better and better. And you can kind of see that in Formula One as well. He's a little bit of a late bloomer in that regard. And, the first season, it was very much a learning year for him back in 2020, and not a lot was expected of him, and he sort of delivered as was expected. But last year, you could see that he'd made that step up. And again, you would just expect him to kick on with another year of experience with Williams, another year of being in that team. Everyone kind of starts on a little bit more of a level playing field, if you like, because obviously these cars are new. So it would be, honestly, I think it would be really great if he's able to kick on, and if Williams has the car to do it, score points consistently. I think that would be, his win condition for the season, if you like.
And Latifi is joined by Alex Albon, obviously spent last year on the sidelines with Red Bull as their test and reserve driver, making a full-time return to racing though this season. I was also racing in DTM last year, but he's now back in F1. Are you excited? I'm pretty excited to see Alex back on the grid, because I always thought he got a bit of a rough ride towards the end of his time in F1, and we saw flashes of brilliance from him. That Red Bull, we know how tricky it was to drive. So is this a good chance to sort of reset things and for him to really show that ability that I think we saw glimpses of, and particularly in his time at Toro Rosso when he really impressed?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you, because he didn't really get the post Red Bull chance that Pierre Gasly did, and we've just seen how fantastic Gasly has been in the last couple of seasons with AlphaTauri. For Alex Albon, this is another situation like that. It's a relatively low pressure environment with a kind of midfieldish team. Obviously Williams is a little bit further back in the pecking order, but it's a similar kind of environment, and he's got a lot of good people within the team to work with, part of Jost Capito's kind of rebirth of the team, if you like. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot of opportunity for him. I think in terms of replacement for George Russell as well, I think he's the sort of best like-for-like replacement that Williams was going to get. Continues their trend of signing very tall drivers as well. So that's, I guess that's good from an engineering standpoint, that they don't have to compromise too much. But yeah, it's a fantastic chance for him. And I think, maybe getting used to the team, it might take him a little bit of time just to get up to speed a little bit. But I think, once we hit mid-season and he starts to hit his stride, then, we'll start to see the best out of him.
Certainly. And to finish off, JBL, you mentioned Jost Capito and the rebirth of Williams, because that is really what the team has been doing. It's gone through such a lot of change since it really hit its nadir in 2019, when it was late for testing and didn't really recover from that for sort of through 19 and 20. Obviously had the change in ownership, and then last year was such a big breakthrough. Got that podium in inverted commas at Spa, but it was consistently up there fighting on the fringes of the points and managed to snare a few points as the season went on. So it was definitely a big step forward. With this rule reset, I mean, every team is going to go into it saying, oh, this is our chance. But for Williams in particular, a team with such a rich history and heritage, how crucial is it that it is the team to really take advantage of it and make a step forward and return to becoming a point scorer on a consistent basis?
Well, it's absolutely huge, I think, because, and you talk about that 2019 nadir as well. What I don't think people realise is how much of a hangover that had for the team, because the car that they developed for that season, I remember speaking to Dave Robson about this a couple of years ago, and he said, this is a car that's going to be, evolved for 2020. And so they had to start with 2020 with that car, and then had to evolve it even further for 2021 because of the changes in regulations. And the fact they managed to turn that car around from being absolutely nowhere to getting points, not just that podium, but on merit in Hungary and on merit in I think Russia as well. That's a fantastic turnaround. It really is. And if Williams can take that and be able to kick on for 2022 with that sort of run of form, with that profligacy in turning around a car technically with the new team that it's got, that it looks like it's in a really good place. So it will be fantastic to see. Hopefully they can deliver on that promise. I guess we shouldn't get too excited, baby steps and all that, and it's still in sort of like a rebirth, but it's kind of hard not to be excited. It feels like a team that's really turned the corner, and we saw it with McLaren a couple seasons ago, and hopefully we'll see it with Williams as well.
Absolutely. Well, fingers crossed. Jake, thank you very much for joining me. So that is the Williams FW44. We're nearly at the end of launch season now. We've only got 4 more cars to be unveiled, 3 more with proper presentations before the first test in Barcelona. We'll obviously have all of the reaction analysis as launch season continues. We've got Ferrari next up, so one of the big hitters. Be sure to stay tuned to all of our channels for all of the reaction to that. And yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button.